Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Israel strikes Tehran and Beirut as Trump claims a role in Iran's leadership. President Emmanuel Macron announces France will deliver armoured transport vehicles to the Lebanese army. And Azerbaijan will evacuate staff from its embassy in Tehran and its consulate in Tabriz. US officials say their objectives in the war with Iran have not expanded as the conflict enters its seventh day. But US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says firepower over Iran is about to surge dramatically. At the same time, President Donald Trump says Washington wants a role in shaping Iran's future leadership.
The war between Iran, Israel and the United States entered its seventh day on Friday, with airstrikes, missile attacks and naval clashes continuing across the region. US President Donald Trump said in a phone interview with Reuters that Washington should have a role in choosing Iran's future leadership after the conflict. The comment raised questions about whether the United States was seeking regime change in Tehran. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth denied that the war's objectives had expanded.
Well, there's no expansion. Ultimately, I think the president's having a heck of a say in who runs Iran, given the ongoing operation we have. So there's no expansion in our objectives. We know exactly what we're trying to achieve.
At the same time, Israel says plans to remove Iran's leadership had been discussed months before the current conflict.
We were already in November when we sat with the Prime Minister in a very small forum, and the Prime Minister set a goal to eliminate the Khamenei regime in November.
Iran says at least 1,230 people have been killed since the start of the bombardment. Iranian media also reported missile strikes hitting buildings, including 2 schools in the town of Parand, southwest of Tehran. US officials are investigating whether American forces may have been responsible for an earlier strike on a girls' school in the southern city of Minab, where Iranian authorities say 165 students and staff were killed. Iran has responded with missile and drone attacks targeting Israel and Gulf states, including the United Arab Emirates, Qatar and Bahrain. A refinery in Bahrain caught fire after a missile strike, while Israel reported overnight missile and drone attacks near Tel Aviv. The conflict is also spreading beyond the main front lines. Lebanon's Hezbollah has warned Israeli residents to evacuate towns within 5 kilometers of the border after Israeli airstrikes prompted evacuations in parts of Beirut's southern suburbs.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard said that it's ready for an extended war with Israel and the United States. Next leader's election process is also underway. Taraz Shualiliu has more from Tehran.
I have arrived at downtown Tehran, where the weekly Friday prayers are held, with worshippers chanting anti-US and anti-Israel slogans in condemnation of their invasion. On the 7th of the war, and in a new development, the Islamic Revolution Guards Corps, IRGC, has announced that it is fully prepared for a prolonged conflict, planning to deploy advanced weaponry not used yet in the current war. Brigadier General Ali Mohammad Naini said Iran's enemies should expect painful blows in the coming wave of attacks and added, initiatives and new weapons not deployed on a large scale are on the way. Following the US-Israel air raids against civilian centers, Iran's ambassador to the United Nations, Amir Said Iravani, has written an official letter to UN Security Council. He said that the US and Israel have deliberately targeted densely populated civilian areas and vital civilian infrastructure, which constitutes a clear violation of the Charter of the United Nations. On Thursday, the Martyrs Foundation announced the total number of civilian casualties surpassed 1,230 people, saying that 200 of them were girl students killed by U.S. attack on their school in south of Iran during the first day of war last Saturday. Meantime, member of Golestan province in Leadership Experts Council, Ayatollah Mohsen Taheri, said that in absentia voting in election of the new leader is underway and the result will be announced soon. According to official sources, former leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei's burial will be held in the holy city of Mashhad after a farewell ceremony in the capital Tehran, which has been delayed for security reasons. And in another major development, the Interim Leadership Council, which met for the fourth time this week to regulate the election procedure, was also delegated with leaders' constitutional powers to assign or remove military commanders and also declare war or peace. According to official sources, the decision was adopted in a bid to avoid executive and command vacuum in the wartime. Turaj Shiralilu reporting for A News at the scene of Friday prayers in Tehran.
Israel says its operation against Iran is entering a new stage. Meanwhile, strikes are continuing against Hezbollah targets in Dahir, a southern suburb of Beirut. Maria Rodriguez Abelda brings more from Tel Aviv.
IDF continues to give details of his operation. 80% of Iran's air defense systems are over, and 60% of Iran's ballistic missile launchers have been destroyed. As the rate of Iran's ballistic missiles fire has decreased, the Israeli military assessed that Hezbollah's attacks on Israel from Lebanon may increase. The National Security Council announcement, in light of serious concerns that terrorist elements are operating with the aim of harming Israelis abroad, urges Israelis overseas to maintain increased vigilance and adhere to safety precautions. According to IDF Chief of Staff, Israel is shifting to next stage. Army will intensify attacks on the Iranian government foundations and military capabilities, indicating that more surprises are coming up. Netanyahu, in a new statement, say the achievements are considerable, but there is still much to be done. Israeli military say it has begun attacking what is described as Hezbollah's infrastructure in Dahiyeh, a suburb south of Beirut, after previously urging residents to evacuate their homes ahead of the bombardment. Said Ali Hamad, responsible for managing all the Hezbollah's firepower and artillery in southern Lebanon, has been eliminated. Fears point to that country now becoming a new Gaza.
The US House of Representatives voted on Thursday against a proposal to restrict President Donald Trump's air campaign against Iran. The plan would have required any military action against Iran to receive prior approval from Congress. The vote was 219 against and 212 in favour, with Trump's fellow Republicans, who hold a slim majority in the House, providing the support needed to defeat the measure. This means Trump retains full authority to continue his military operations in Iran without needing Congress permission, allowing his campaign to proceed on the 6th day of the escalating conflict. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that 4 additional Typhoon fighter jets would be sent to Qatar as the conflict in the Middle East escalates, insisting the UK has the right defence plan in place. The move comes amid criticism from US President Donald Trump over Britain's level of support for strikes on Iran.
I can announce today that we're sending 4 additional Typhoon jets to join our squadron in Qatar, to strengthen our defensive operations in Qatar and across the region.
Staying on this, France is stepping up its support. President Emmanuel Macron announced it will deliver armoured transport vehicles to the Lebanese army. The move is part of a broader plan to strengthen cooperation. Here's more.
France's President Emmanuel Macron says on Thursday he will strengthen military support for Lebanon and send armoured transport vehicles to help the Lebanese army as the country faces rising tensions in the Middle East conflict. Macron said France will increase cooperation with the Lebanese armed forces and provide operational, logistical and humanitarian support to civilians. He warned that everything must be done to stop Lebanon from being dragged further into war. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot confirmed that aid, including medicine and shelters, is being sent to help displaced civilians.
We must provide humanitarian aid to the tens of thousands of people who are now displaced and far from their homes. This is why we have decided that 5 tons, £11,000 of medical aid and equipment, as well as several tons of humanitarian supplies, will be dispatched and will arrive in Lebanon as early as next week.
Macron urged all sides to step back. He called on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to widen the war into Lebanon and asked Iran not to draw the country further into the conflict. He also said Hezbollah must immediately stop firing rockets into Israel, while Israel should avoid any ground operation on Lebanese territory. A move came after the situation escalated earlier this week after the Iran-backed group Hezbollah fired rockets towards Israel, prompting Israeli airstrikes on Beirut's southern suburbs and parts of southern and eastern Lebanon. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun asked Macron to prevent Israeli strikes on southern Beirut, where residents were told to evacuate suspected Hezbollah areas. Meanwhile, France has begun evacuating its citizens from the Middle East, with hundreds already returned as tensions rise across the region.
Air travel across the Middle East has been thrown into chaos after US and Israeli strikes on Tehran, leaving thousands stranded. Hundreds of travellers are now returning home through commercial flights and government-organised evacuations. Here's more.
US and Israel launched an attack on Tehran, which has had a knock-on effect to aviation in the region. Numerous flights have been cancelled, leaving people stranded. Passengers arriving in Toronto from Abu Dhabi said they were relieved to be home, but criticised authorities for not doing more to assist citizens stranded in the region.
So I know that many people there are stuck, many people there are in our position. I was lucky to jump fast, but I don't know for other people. So I wish if Canada can do something for people there stuck there in the Middle East, because many of them, and I feel Canada, they're not doing as much.
We saw the missiles everywhere, so that was horrible and terrifying. So that's why we are feeling relaxed now.
In the United States, travelers arriving at Washington Dulles International Airport from countries in the Middle East said they were relieved to be away from the danger following the outbreak. However, several passengers said they were disappointed by the limited assistance from authorities.
We had a little bit of a scare this morning at the airport. They had to evacuate due to safety threats. But all the flights were able to take off, which was great.
Meanwhile, Ugandan students and workers evacuated from Iran arrived after the government organized an emergency repatriation effort. Most of them were students who had to put their studies on hold and flee.
In just a week and complete my studies, I come with mixed feelings because I just had a few days to complete my studies and I come completely. But it is unfortunate that things unfolded in a negative way and I had to leave things there.
Indian travelers stranded in Abu Dhabi also returned home after several days of delays caused by cancelled flights and security alerts. Passengers said authorities in the UAE arranged accommodation, food and assistance until flight services resumed. As regional tensions continue, governments are working to bring home citizens and ease travel disruptions across the Middle East.
As the war in the Middle East continues to rage on, China is making efforts to de-escalate tensions by sending its special envoy for Middle East affairs, Zai Jun, to encourage dialogue. Our correspondent in Beijing brings us more.
China said it will send its special envoy for Middle East affairs, Zai Jun, to the region to help push for de-escalation as tensions continue to rise following recent military actions and security incidents in the Middle East. China's foreign ministry said that the envoy will visit relevant countries and stay in close communication with all sides to encourage dialogue and prevent the situation from worsening. Beijing has repeatedly called for calm and restraint, warning that further military escalation could destabilize the region and affect global security and energy markets. Chinese officials say the priority should be easing tensions and returning to dialogue and political solutions rather than military confrontation. According to the Foreign Ministry, Zai Jun will meet officials and regional stakeholders during the visit as part of China's efforts to encourage communication between the parties involved. Chai has served as China's special envoy for Middle East affairs since 2019 and has previously held talks with officials across the region during past crises, promoting ceasefires and political dialogue. China says his trip aims to help reduce tensions and support stability in the region. Manu Maftoum, A News, Beijing.
Venezuela's acting president Delcy Rodriguez has signed oil agreements with international major Shell. State television reported on Thursday, though no further details were provided. This comes after a meeting with US Interior Secretary Doug Burgum on Wednesday in Caracas, during which the two countries also agreed to cooperate on developing Venezuela's mining sector. Burgum, who leads the US National Energy Dominance Council, praised Rodriguez's efforts to open the country to foreign investment, a position also welcomed by US President Donald Trump. After the break, we look at reports of explosions in Abu Dhabi as the UAE activated its air defense systems in response to a missile threat linked to the ongoing conflict with Iran. We'll also examine what Iran's strategy may be as it launches attacks across several countries in the region. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Explosions were heard in Abu Dhabi after air defense systems in the United Arab Emirates responded to a missile threat as Iran continues launching missile and drone attacks across the Gulf. Several countries hosting US military assets, including the UAE, Qatar and Bahrain, have come under attack in recent days. The developments raise a key question. Is Tehran pursuing a coordinated regional strategy or reacting to mounting military pressure from Israel and the United States? To discuss, let's bring in our guest now, Maurice Hirsch from Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Maurice, welcome to the program.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Now, why would Iran target countries like the UAE that are not directly fighting it?
I think Iran's goal as part of its defense doctrine is to internationalize this conflict as much as possible, as many countries as possible. So countries will then apply pressure to President Trump to stop the attack on Iran. I think that's their goal. They don't really have that idea of a rational behavior, which would, you're being attacked by the US and by Israel, so you can possibly defend yourselves against those two elements. What they're doing is making sure that as many countries are being dragged into this situation as possible.
And to what extent, though, are these strikes aimed at US military assets stationed in Gulf states?
Well, I think we're seeing really a combination of attempted attacks on some of the US assets, but also just indiscriminate attacks by the Iranians against the civilians in almost all of the countries that have been attacked. We haven't seen any type of particular adherence to the laws of war on the side of the Iranians. They've been targeting hotels. They've been targeting civilians here in Israel, using even cluster bombs over civilian populations. These are the acts of a terrorist regime that is really doing its utmost in order to just to get to the end goal from their point of view is just survival. Just to say at the end of this conflict, we, the Ayatollahs, are still in charge.
Okay, so if Iran is firing at so many countries simultaneously, is the goal military victory or simply to make the conflict too costly for everyone involved, do you think?
I'm certain that it's not the military victory. They inflict as much damage, as much suffering on everyone around them. They understand that they are backed into a corner now. They refused any type of negotiation attempt by President Trump. If you remember, before this war started, they were given the opportunity to come bona fides to the negotiating table. After the strike, after Midnight Hammer last year, they had the opportunity to really break down and dismantle their what was left of their nuclear program. Instead, they decided to push forward to get military nuclear capabilities. They decided to enhance instead of rolling back their production of ballistic missiles. They took every opportunity that they were given, and said, we don't want anything. We want to inflict as much damage, as much pain, as much suffering on the region until our demands are met and until we become a nuclear threshold country, in which case they would have been able to do anything to anybody with almost absolute impunity. That was the urgency of this strike being carried out at the timing that it was carried out. And their goal is now just inflict pain, maybe survive to see the end of this conflict, and still in charge, still able to repress and oppress the Iranian people, and still able to project their evil access to the entire region.
You said earlier, Maurice, that this is somewhat an attempt to widen the conflict and increase pressure on Washington and its allies, or a strategy to internationalize the conflict so that regional powers pressure Washington to cease their war on Iran. Do you think it will be effective?
No, I don't think so. I think that the countries that have been attacked by Iran are not now turning to President Trump and saying, well, why did you start this war? This, if you remember, was one of the subjects that was raised in the pre-operational stage. Trump expressed his reservations, and yet President Trump explained to him that if we do not seize the opportunity now to defang this this monster, then that monster will come back with greater force to attack Saudi Arabia. So this is in Saudi Arabia's best interest long-term going forward, albeit with short-term inconvenience.
Do these attacks suggest, though, a centralized military strategy directed from Tehran, or more decentralized actions by Iranian commanders and allied groups?
Well, I think what we're already seeing from the start of this conflict, having really started by taking out the leadership of the regime, taking out their political and military leadership, that we're seeing now more of a response based on a project, on a program that was set in place before the war started. Should we be attacked? Should we be incapable of conducting our normal activities? Then this is the plan that needs to be implemented. I think that is what we're seeing on the ground. At some stage, obviously, considering the lack of any type of guiding hand of a political leadership, military leadership, this plan in and of itself will also fizzle out. We're seeing just over a 90% reduction in some areas of the amount of missiles that have been fired by the Iranians towards all the different countries in the area. So we're seeing that the cumulative effect, obviously, of the military operations on the ground from the air, and that will the Iranians respond.
And how important are Iran's regional networks and proxy forces in sustaining this campaign?
Well, so obviously we've already seen Hezbollah, specifically for Israel, jumping into the fray, really endangering the entirety of Lebanon. Hezbollah dragged Lebanon into this fight together with Hamas on the 8th of October 2023, and Lebanon paid a very, very high price for that. Unfortunately, Hezbollah, at the behest of the Iranians, are doing that again and really operating and using their proxies around the region has become much more difficult. Hezbollah is not what it be. Hezbollah is still a very lethal force, but certainly not the great prowess that it had 2.5 years ago. The same with the Houthis in Yemen. They no longer have those long-range capabilities to the extent that they did 2.5 years ago. They were no longer receiving the replenishment from the Iranians of those weapons, and that's something operating in Kuwait in Iraq is the same thing. All of those proxies are now suffering the consequences of both the war that's been going on and now the assault on Iran itself on the head of the snake.
Now, contrary to what you were saying before, Maurice, could these attacks push Gulf states closer into military coordination with the United States and Israel?
I think certainly, I think what we're seeing now is really an apocalypse for Iran. We're seeing Israel together with Saudi Arabia, together with Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates. It would never have been bedfellows prior to these attacks, now working and coordinating together in order against Iran. Qatar has never been an ally of Israel, and yet now you see the Qataris being attacked and responding. This is not a war on Israel. This is not a war of Iran only on Israel. This is a war of Iran on the entire region, as they face really the opportunity to say, you know what, we're willing to give up on our malicious intentions, or alternatively face the consequences. And they chose to face the consequences rather than letting their people live in greater freedom and giving up on their nuclear program, which really has cost them hundreds of billions of dollars, instead of finding a solution for their catastrophic water solution problem that they've been facing, finding a solution for the economy of the Iranians. All of these things could have been done as an alternative to seeking weapons of mass destruction. The Iranian, unfortunately, the Ayatollahs made the wrong choice.
Maurice, that's all we have time for at the moment. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for your analysis.
Thank you for having me.
Now we'll take a break. When we return, we'll look at major stories from the region. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Azerbaijan will evacuate staff from its embassy in Tehran and its consulate in Tabriz. Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov said the decision was taken on the instructions of President Ilham Aliyev.
Azerbaijan is withdrawing its entire diplomatic staff from Iran following the drone attack on the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic. Azerbaijan's Foreign Minister, Ceyhun Bayramov, announced the decision during a press briefing in Baku, alongside Moldova's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Mihai Popshoy.
Instructions have been issued for the evacuation of the staff of both our embassy in Tehran and our Consulate General in Tabriz from the Islamic Republic of Iran. And these instructions are currently being implemented. Given all these developments, we clearly cannot place the lives of our people at risk. From this point forward, the situation will, of course, be closely monitored. Naturally, we will await the outcome of the investigation promised by the Iranian side, and depending on its results, further decisions will be taken by our side.
At the same press conference, Moldova's Foreign Minister Mihai Popshoy condemned the drone strikes.
In light of the recent attacks on civilian infrastructure in the autonomous Nakhchivan Republic of Azerbaijan, Moldova firmly condemns the targeting of civilian facilities and the injuries inflicted upon civilians. We stand in full solidarity with the people of Azerbaijan and reiterate our unwavering support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Azerbaijan.
Support also came from Pakistan. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif called Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. Sharif condemned Iran's military attack, stating that Pakistan's state and army stand with Azerbaijan in these difficult days. Azerbaijan's Prime Minister Ali Asadov also held a telephone conversation with Turkey's Vice President Cevdet Yilmaz. During the call, the Azerbaijani side expressed strong protest over the drone attacks carried out from Iran, stating that the strikes violate the norms and principles of international law. The officials also highlighted that President Recep Tayyip Erdogan immediately called President Ilham Aliyev after the attack, expressing support for the Azerbaijani people. Prime Minister Asadov also thanked Turkey for its prompt assistance in organizing temporary flights to Igdir Airport to ensure safe air traffic to Nakhchivan amid the current situation. The diplomatic move follows the drone attacks on Azerbaijan's Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic on March 5th. 4 civilians were injured in the airport attack.
In response, President Ilham Aliyev has strongly condemned the drone attack, calling it an act of terror and warning that the country's armed forces have been instructed to prepare retaliatory measures.
Iranian drones entered the airspace of Azerbaijan's Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic and struck what authorities describe as civilian sites. Following the incident, President Ilham Aliyev chaired meeting of Security Council.
Bugün İran tərəfindən Azərbaycan ərazisinə qarşı, Azərbaycan dövlətinə qarşı
Today, Iran committed an act of terror against the territory of Azerbaijan, against the state of Azerbaijan.
Ərazisini İran dövləti
The Iranian state fired unmanned aerial vehicles into the territory of the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic. The targets of the attack were civilian facilities. The Nakhchivan International Airport, its terminal, a school, and other places were subjected to cowardly fire from Iran.
İran tərəfindən namərd atəşə məruz qalmışdır.
Aliyev said Azerbaijan has demanded answers from Tehran and called for those responsible to face justice.
Azərbaycan dövləti bu çirkin terror aktını qətiyyətlə pisləyir.
The state of Azerbaijan vehemently condemns this ugly act of terror, and those who committed it must be immediately held accountable. Iranian officials must provide an explanation to the Azerbaijani side. An apology must be offered, and those who committed this terrorist act must be held criminally liable.
Terror aktını törədənlər cinayət məsuliyyətinə cəlb edilməlidir.
Aliyev also noted that Azerbaijan would not tolerate what he described as aggression and confirmed that the country's military had been instructed to prepare a response.
Biz bu əsassız terror
We will not put up with this groundless act of terror and aggression committed against Azerbaijan. Our armed forces have been instructed to prepare and implement retaliatory measures.
Tədbirləri hazırlansın və həyata keçirilsin.
President Aliyev highlighted that the Iranian ambassador has been summoned to Azerbaijan's foreign ministry and a formal protest note will be delivered. Security agencies have also been placed on heightened readiness.
Bizim dəmir yumruğumuzu onlar görəcəklər.
Evacuations from Iran are continuing through Azerbaijan as foreign nationals leave the country amid heightened regional tensions. The Astara state border checkpoint has become a key exit route, with hundreds of people from dozens of countries crossing into Azerbaijan in recent days. Our Chimnaz Shahlar reports.
Evacuations from Iran through the Astara state border checkpoint are continuing. Most recently, 24 Chinese citizens were evacuated from Iran to Azerbaijan through the Astara crossing. 2 citizens of the United Arab Emirates have also crossed the border through this checkpoint. During the night, representatives of the United Nations Department of Safety and Security were also evacuated. In total, 15 UN staff members entered Azerbaijan. Earlier, Italy's embassy in Iran evacuated 45 member staff through the Astara. Overall, more than 1,300 people have now been evacuated from Iran through the Astara following US and Israel military operations on February 28. The evacuees represent 45 countries. Here in Astara, the checkpoint has become a key route for people leaving Iran. We remain here at the Astara crossing, continuing to follow the evacuation process. I'm Chimnaz Shahlar with Nijat Gasimov for A News.
NATO has moved to strengthen its ballistic missile defence posture following a missile incident involving Turkish airspace earlier this week. The alliance says the decision comes amid rising regional tensions and concerns over missile activity across the Middle East. Here are the details.
NATO has placed its collective ballistic missile defense system on heightened alert after a missile launched toward Turkish airspace was intercepted earlier this week. In a statement issued late Thursday, a NATO spokesman said the alliance had enhanced its defensive posture in response to what he described as Iran's indiscriminate missile attacks across the region. The move followed the interception of a ballistic missile that was fired toward Turkey on Wednesday. According to Turkish authorities, NATO air defense units destroyed the incoming missile over the eastern Mediterranean after it was detected over Iraqi and Syrian airspace. Tehran, for its part, has denied launching any missiles toward Turkish territory, stressing its respect for Turkey's sovereignty. Despite the denial, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said Ankara was leaving nothing to chance when it comes to protecting the country's borders and airspace. He also said that Turkey was taking all necessary precautions in close coordination with its NATO allies. Turkey has been a member of NATO since 1952 and fields the second largest standing army within the alliance after the United States. Ankara is also set to host a major NATO leaders summit later this summer. This is Adamara for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
A new UN report warns that thousands of families have been displaced and dozens of civilians killed following days of escalating violence along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
According to the United Nations, airstrikes and border clashes between Afghanistan and Pakistan have affected at least 10 provinces since late February. At least 56 civilians have been killed and 129 injured, while more than 16,000 families have been newly displaced. That adds to those still displaced by last year's earthquake, bringing the total to more than 23,000 families. Aid agencies say airstrikes have damaged health facilities and humanitarian sites, while access to some areas remains limited due to ongoing fighting. The escalation follows cross-border strikes between Afghan and Pakistani forces. Pakistan says it targeted militants linked to the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, while Afghan authorities condemned the strikes and say they responded with retaliatory attacks. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has offered to mediate as Russia and China call for de-escalation. But with fighting still continuing, aid agencies warn more people could be displaced. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Kazakhstan is moving forward with new oil and gas exploration projects involving international energy companies. The British energy company Shell has signed a new agreement with the country's Ministry of Energy to begin geological exploration in western Kazakhstan. Our correspondent reports from Almaty.
A new exploration agreement between the British energy company Shell and Kazakhstan's Ministry of Energy opens a new stage of geological exploration in the country's west. The project focuses on the Zhana-Termos block in the Aktobe region, an area considered one of Kazakhstan's promising oil and gas basins. The exploration site covers about 1,377 square kilometers and is expected to expand geological exploratory activities in the country. Under the agreement, Shell will conduct 3D seismic surveys, collect geological data and carry out a technical assessment of the field. The work program may also include drilling a deep exploratory well. Kazakhstan's Vice Minister of Energy Yerlan Akbarov says the project is aimed at forming a long-term hydrocarbon resource base to strengthen the country's energy security and support economic growth. The exploration contract will run until 2032, reflecting the scale and technical complexity of the project. As part of the agreement, the company will also allocate at least about $200,000 to support social and economic development in the region where the block is located. And according to the Ministry of Energy, 321 contracts for hydrocarbon exploration and production are currently active in Kazakhstan's subsoil use sector. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
And now for some sports news. Now let's go to Azerbaijan's Shakhtar, where our team is following the Ski Mountaineering European Championship. Here's the latest from the third day of the tournament.
Europe's top skiers are competing in Azerbaijan's northeastern winter resort Shakhtar for the third consecutive day. The Ski Mountaineering European Championship is heating up with ruthless battles as a fight for the podium tightens. The weather conditions are just ideal for the athletes. The temperature stands at 0 and the sky is clear. Today, athletes are competing in the individual discipline, which means a long race with multiple multiple climbs and descents. Athletes must adjust their equipment each time to match the landscape, so they perform 5 to 10 transitions or even more depending on the course. For this, skiers carry a backpack, and by equipment transition, I mean that in the steep sections of the mountains, athletes change their gear from skis to boots and start to hike. Then on the downhills, they switch back to skis again. The faster they make these changes, the better the result. Earlier, we tracked them from above using cable cars and witnessed their ascent. What we saw is that the battle is really fierce on steep hills and extremely physical. Now, I want to quickly mention yesterday's mixed relay discipline results. In the youth event, athletes from Germany secured the gold medal, while Spain and Russia took silver and bronze respectively. In the seniors event, as expected, the Swiss team snatched the gold medal, while Italy and Germany secured silver and bronze respectively. With still 2 days to go, we will be here following the latest updates from the European Championship. Narçiçek Cihangirli, Natik Mehmedov, Aves Hacıyev, A News.
After the break, we turn to regional developments as Azerbaijan orders the evacuation of its Tehran embassy and Tabriz consulate staff following drone strikes by Iran in the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Following the reported Iranian drone attack on Azerbaijan's Nakhchivan airport, President Ilham Aliyev characterized the incident as an ugly act of terror against Azerbaijan by Iran, demanding that those responsible be held criminally accountable. It is in his remarks during the Security Council meeting, the President used strong language, stating that this stain will never be erased from their ugly and unsightly face, referring to those responsible for the attack. Amongst the measures taken by Baku in response to the incident, Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov announced that the President of Azerbaijan has decided to evacuate all diplomatic personnel from its embassy in Tehran and the consulate in Tabriz. Earlier, the Azerbaijani government also announced the suspension of truck traffic across the Azerbaijani-Iranian state border, adding a further layer to the measures adopted in response to the incident. And at the same time, President Aliyev stated that Azerbaijan will not take part in any military campaign against Iran and will not allow its territory to be used for offensive operations, while confirming that the country's armed forces and special service units have been brought to level 1 mobilization readiness. Let's bring in our guest, Kaya Mammadov, Member of Parliament from Baku, Azerbaijan. Kaya, welcome to the program.
Hello.
Now, what's your evaluation of Azerbaijan's decision to evacuate its diplomatic personnel from Tehran and Tabriz in view of the ongoing war in and around Iran and the latest tensions between Baku and Tehran following the drone strike on Nakhchivan? Of course, evacuation doesn't mean diplomatic withdrawal as such, but it's still an important step. In your view, what may follow from here?
Indeed, Foreign Minister Bayram has informed us that it was decided to of Azerbaijan embassy in Tehran, Consulate General in this is very much justified given the regarding Iran in general and regard to Azerbaijan representation. It is already second. Also, it is diplomatic personnel from Iran. The first one, roughly, an armed attack. Now the situation, apparently, according to assessment, warrants such a step. I believe, again, given the prehistory and in general tendency in Iran to attack diplomatic missions of countries with whom it has some disagreement with, I think it's very much justified.
Okay, and President Aliyev made it clear that Azerbaijan will not participate in military operations against Iran. Yet at the same time, the country's armed forces and special units have been placed on level 1 readiness after the Nakhchivan strike. How should we interpret this approach entailing restraint on the one hand and heightened security preparedness on the other?
Well, first of all, Azerbaijan has just emerged from a prolonged armed conflict, from a 30-year war with Armenia. So we perfectly understand what it means in terms of destruction and tragedy, what the war means. And therefore, Azerbaijan has always been careful to seek resolution of all issues by diplomatic means, and has always exercised restraint. On the other hand, again, another lesson we learned from our conflict with Armenia, that you need to respond to aggressor on time and appropriately. So we just need to calibrate between the two things. So trying to address issues by peaceful means. On the other hand, do not show weaknesses so that aggressor can be tempted to take even more steps. As regards to current situation right now, with or without US-Iran war, Israel-Iran war, right now, Azerbaijan-Iran relations have always been tense due to Iran's actions. I mean, it has been widely reported on it. I don't want to dwell on that particular aspect. But again, Azerbaijan has no interest whatsoever to take part in the war that is ongoing between Iran on one hand and US and Israel on the other hand. That is the clear position of Azerbaijan. But legitimate actions to ensure self-defense is completely different matter. An incident occurred, an armed attack occurred. The government of Azerbaijan has formulated clear demands. First, admitting responsibility. Second, an apology from Iran. Three, taking steps who conducted. I'm taking legal steps against who conducted this attack on my country. I think this leaves the door open for an Iranian side. They should take this opportunity, I believe, for the sake of not to escalating the situation further.
And do you think Iran may continue to target locations beyond what might normally be considered its immediate retaliatory space? In other words, could Iran deliberately expand the scope of its strikes in order to draw additional countries into the conflict, thereby increasing pressure on the US? Some analysts suggest that such a strategy could aim to compel regional actors to urge Washington to halt operations against Iran.
Well, it's very difficult to exactly analyze Iran's decision-making and its rationale. In any case, attacking Azerbaijan is wrong and reckless. Azerbaijan has signaled many times and has demonstrated in practice that it will not tolerate any armed attacks on its sovereignty. What is Iranian decision-making rationale? I don't know. Maybe they want to, again, as suggested, to force regional countries to reach out United States and Israel so that they stop. But it's not something appropriate for Azerbaijan case.
And Mr. Mammadov, Turkey has expressed strong support for Azerbaijan following the drone attack, with President Erdogan stating that an attack on Azerbaijan is an attack on Turkey. Earlier, when Iranian missiles entered Turkish airspace, NATO explicitly said that Article 5 was not under consideration. In the case of any further attack on Azerbaijan, and bearing in mind Turkey's treaty-based alliance with Azerbaijan and its mutual defence commitments, do you see a chain of events emerging that could eventually lead to discussions with NATO regarding Article 5?
Well, it is quite understandable that regional countries have one or another collective defense arrangements. We also have that one with Turkey. And whether the scale and magnitude of a potential attack might lead to it, it is hard to predict from now on. But in any case, having such collective defense alliances arrangements is a very strong deterring factor. We would like to believe that Iranians will not make further mistakes in terms of continuing armed attacks on my country.
Mr. Kaimammadov, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. We appreciate your time and analysis.
Thank you very much.
That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates, and thank you for watching.